mind as thinking would work well for the roster, but I also want to present a few options and get some feedback. And as Jessica said, this is not an actual finalized file or anything like that, but it is a work in progress, and what we're thinking will work for this roster file. So first, I'm going to point out that what we're looking at here is for October of 25, because as you'll see when we get towards the very end of the columns, we're calculating out what that bundled payment will be. Again, remember, these are not real numbers, but just sort of some numbers to get us started here and be able to look at the columns. So right now, how I have this built is we are looking only at the funds, and I've also set it up to do rolling up to the levels, generally speaking, that have been on the waiver spreadsheets. So for staff living, this isn't broken out by 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or 2-to-1, but it's all included and rolled up into here. And we'll talk through what some different options are, and we'll get a sense of what's going to work for the majority of the group. I wouldn't be able to do customized rosters, but hopefully there'll be a consensus on what would be the most helpful for these files. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of walk through some of the columns. We started out talking about staff living, and then we have group living. Again, this is all group living in one column. Shared living, this is the monthly shared living service. And then this is the shared living hourly agency provided service, and the shared living ARIS paid contract funds. So again, everything is rolled up. So I know shared living can be provided 1-to-1, 1-to-2, and so forth. But these are rolled up and inclusive of all of those different varieties of the shared living hourly. And then the same. Oh, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you mind if I ask a really basic, probably obvious question?
Please ask questions.
I think you have some rows hidden, and that's where the identifiable demographic data would be. Is that so? It would be like the name and.
Yes, name, birth date, IDs. It's all going to be right here. I just have it hidden for the presentation purposes.
Great, thank you.
Good question. I just left the CMO because that wasn't identifying. But yes, all of those details will be included. So I think we were talking about in-home family support. And Chuck, do you have a question?
Yeah, just one last question on that is what's the identifier, like the specific identifier that can be used to, is Medicaid number, or?
I was planning on listing both the Social Security number and the Medicaid ID, since the previously the waiver spreadsheets had the Social Security number on them. I just thought to minimize any confusion in case people needed both, I would put both on there.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, similar to shared living hourly, we have the in-home family support agency provided and in-home family support paid through ARIS. And then, and I did set these up, I believe more or less they were going in order of the budget calculator. So now we're at the ERS testing and installation, and then the ERS monthly fee. Again, both just for the October funds. And then next on our budget calculator is the community support columns. And so I'm bringing those in. I did keep it broken out between community support facility and community support non-facility agency provided services. And then as part of this is a work in progress, I do not have the community support ARIS paid funds in here yet. I've just been working on building this out, but hopefully you get the idea of what we're talking about as far as rolling up into categories and what that looks like. And then, so you can kind of just imagine we're skipping over the rest of these services and then going to talk about these columns at the end. So this is showing, the residential column is showing the sum of all of the residential services. And then the non-residential column is summing up all of the non-residential services as that are part of the bundled payments. And then that's showing what the bundled services plan total is for October of 25. Column S is showing what the flexibility factor calculation is, which is that 5% calculated off the total plan. And in column T, we're showing the non-residential October 25 funds with the utilization factor applied. And then column U is allowing us to calculate that final bundled payment, which would be residential services plus the flexibility factor and the non-residential with the utilization applied.
We have a question in the chat, and then Christine raised her hand. So Sarah put in the chat, will our roster file have the detail tab so we can review by creating our own pivot tables?
Well, that's a good question. We had not yet decided whether or not the final product would have a pivot table capability or not. But if you'd like, I'll show you. So I wanted to show what this would look like if we included all of the detail, which we can. So this is going to show, staff living 1-to-1 units, staff living 1-to-1 funds, staff living 1-to-2 units, staff living 1-to-2 funds. And then I'm just going to kind of scroll down because I think I got my community supports loaded in here. Oh, in home I've got in here, and it's quite detailed as far as the in-home family supports 1-to-1 October units, October funds, 2-to-1 October units, 2-to-1 funds, and so forth. So one of the reasons I went to the roll up is this is a lot of detail, and it's going to make the spreadsheet really large. So it sounds like, based on the question that you were reading, Jessica, there is an interest in seeing the detail.
I think, Sarah, from what you wrote, it sounds like you would appreciate having the detail as an option. But to your point, Tina, having the more concise roster that you can do a quick visual of might be also really helpful for people who are looking more for the snapshot of information.
Mm-hmm. Okay. See, I can't quite see. I know there's hands raised.
We have, let me just get this person admitted. So Christine.
So at the very end where you were totaling, is that going to be a formula, or are we going to be entering, or is somebody going to be entering those as numbers? I see right now they're just raw numbers.
So right now it's driven by the there's pivot table behind this, so that's where that number is coming from. You would certainly not be expected to input any numbers. This would be presented for you, and we would, if we present the numbers this way, we would go ahead and provide a key to talk through, so you would understand exactly what is in each column.
Okay.
And Tina, if this were an agency's roster, when you got down to the bottom, would there be a per member per month calculation?
Yes. Yes.
And Brent?
So I guess my first question, so what we're seeing here and what your current thinking is, we will get each month we're getting just the month. So everything we're looking at here in this sample is October, and it's right now what you're showing is all the dollars for each category rolled up for October. Then you started to show us the units, and maybe I didn't see it on the first way through, but maybe you had it hidden or you unhid something, I'm not sure. I suppose in theory, I'm just going to say it out loud. I guess I have to talk out loud and think it through. Originally, my thinking of what I was hoping that we would be getting in a roster file is that, and maybe having a month to month is great, but what I was envisioning, or what I'm trying to figure out what we need, and I'm glad Michelle is on the line, is that creating our own internal reporting based on what you give us, and I guess whether that's units or dollars is fine. In my brain, I was reconciling on units. But what I was envisioning was, or at least what I thought that I needed, and maybe I can work with this somehow, I don't know, is that we would get a report each month saying, in community supports for the year, whether that's 9 months this year, and in the future would be a year's worth, right? In a year, this person will receive 2,668 units of community. They'll get 3,700 units of employment, etc., so that we would know this is how many units somebody is getting in the year. And of course, each month, as the calculators change, I guess then in theory, those amounts change, right? But unlike the waiver spreadsheet where we had a line for each person, that we would in theory have a line for each person of their authorizations. And I guess whether that's units or dollars or units and dollars or fine, we can try to work through that. But I was envisioning that we would have something that we could take, import, and say, okay, this person's authorized for this many units for the whole year. We can take our own data from our EMRs to be able to say, oh, we've delivered 100 units so far, and do the calculations to say where are we with our utilization based on what they're authorized for. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that with a report that's only giving me 1 month worth of the data. And so maybe my thinking on what we need is completely separate from this. But I'm just downloading my thinking on what I know that I need, right, in order to do this. I think I'm going to need something like that that says, what's the whole authorization for this person, so we can do our own math internally. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think you brought up some excellent questions. I'm going to, so I actually haven't even gotten to this full roster tab over here, so I'm going to get there because I think that's going to partly answer your question. I'm going to hit stop here for a minute. We kind of talked briefly about this one with all of the detail, but this one does, yeah. Again, this is a work in progress, so I do apologize, but we are bringing in the units and the funds on this detail page. Again, I was trying to show the breakout of, this is a lot of columns. We can talk through what might work better. I also, again, this is a work in progress. In this roster file of this one was including the whole 9 months total. So this is showing it by funds, but we could do the total 9 months in units. I'm just trying to think out, would you want units and funds on the same page in total? Like, and would you want these rolled up like this, or more of the detailed breakout?
Yeah,
So-
personally, I don't think I'd mind the rolled up piece, the breaking it, even when I'm starting to try to make some of my own calculators and things internally to think through it. I'm trying to be like, okay, roll it all up together. Like community supports is community supports, whether it's 1-to-1, 2-to-1, etc. So I think just as it stands now, that being rolled up would be fine. I think like it's this many units of community for the year and this many dollars of community for the year. I think both would be great. That would certainly allow the most flexibility for how people want to use it or report off of it. Having both would be great, personally. But rolled up would probably makes sense.
Just
Okay.
to add, I agree. I think having units and dollar amounts are going to be really important for reconciliation. So
Right.
that would be helpful. And I see just to address the chat, we have people are wanting to see units funded and provided. There's a comment they'd like to be able to download the roster file to enter it into a tool to analyze the data. But we'll just throw out the caveat that what is in the shared platform is the source of truth. So if you're taking something down, we just need to make sure that everyone right now hears that what is uploaded onto the shared platform is what the state, the case managers, the DAs, SSAs, and T2, what we all have access to. So that is going to be considered after, you know, Tina runs the analytics, that's really considered the draft. So I just want to make sure people hear that really clearly. And then
then
Steve,
Wanted
Jessica,
ahead.
to check really,
just to jump in quickly on that comment in the chat, we're open, of course, to including the budgeted units, but this is not going to be the tool for delivered units. So if that's what folks were asking about in terms of provided, it will absolutely, unfortunately, but absolutely not be part of this roster file.
thank you for making sure that's very clear. Right, this is the expected approved services that we could anticipate somebody getting. Our encounter data reports that we've been sending, that Hillary sends monthly, that we do our check-ins around, those are going to continue. That is what we have on record is actually being delivered. And like I keep saying, we're in the process of hiring analysts, so we'll be able to grow those reports. But that's where you'll get the information about what was actually delivered.
and that's what I was going to speak to. So Stephen explained that this will not have provided units. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Steve, now you're up.
Thanks. So just want to be clear. So this pivot table you're providing, we're gonna have the ability to change the columns and drill into the data. So somebody asked if we could get the detail tab, but we can drill into this, correct? We can get the detail by double clicking and going down. I know you can't do that because you're going to show all the data you've hidden, but we'll be able to double click and drill in to see the detail behind it, correct?
We just need to finalize decisions. There was some internal discussion about whether or not this would go out as a live pivot table or a hard report. So we'll just have to have some discussion about that.
If it's a live pivot table, then we'll be able to pull the data we need outside of having to ask for custom changes. That's the only thought behind that question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And questions in the chat. Does the roster tab have an effective date range? Which I don't want to speak for you, Tina, but yeah, I think the idea is that you're updating the budget calculators throughout the month. And we're still open to, we're talking with CFOs about what's the right timing, but there's a date where we say all budget calculators have to be updated by this date. Tina will pull them down at, 5 p.m. our time or whatever that is on that date of the month. And then you run the analytics to update this roster. And then that's when there's a certain time frame we want people to be able to review and then say that this is the updated for this date range, right? This roster is for this date range. There's probably a better way to explain it, Tina or Stephen, if you want to do more detail.
Yeah. So just to probably reiterate what you just said, that, this will get updated once a month at the end of the month, and it will produce the final numbers after this is finalized for the month of October. The October columns in the budget calculators will be locked so that we don't accidentally go back and change a month that we already calculated a bundled payment on. And then going forward in the next month, we'll have the November roster file will get put out after the month of November is done. And then October and November will be locked with no changes happening to those months after that month has occurred. But there won't be any, live updates of a certain range. It's just going to be that once a month at the end of the month, that month end processing will take place and the file will get updated.
And we still have a few more questions in the chat before we go to you, Kara. Chuck is asking, will it have changes that occur month to month along with the start date of the changes? So let's say someone changes from shared living to staffed living. There's that part in the budget calculator that asks if there was a change
Right, so let's talk about what that would look like. So if it happened, let's just say that that change happened in the middle of October, and you're looking at your month file, and so they moved from, did you say they moved from shared living to staff living?
Yeah, whatever,
So-
it's not real.
Right, so they would have the budget calculator would calculate the portion of the month that would be funds for shared living. And then there'd be a portion of the month that would have funds for staff living. And for the month of October, you'd see dollar amounts in both of those fields. In their full year file, they would also show that they had had funds during part of the year for shared living and then funds for part of the year in staffed living. One thing we haven't talked about, but this is kind of a good point in time to insert it. This first month, you won't see a change tab or report, if you will, because we're considering these October files to be our starting point. But then in November, if there's a change from October to November, then we would go ahead and we'll populate that change report in here to show you, you know, a change was made. But we're not anticipating doing that for these first October budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
And Denise is asking if this roster is still in draft form, will there be a delay in receiving your October PM rate until it's finalized? Do you have an idea, Tina, right now in terms of the when you think you'll have, after this, taking in feedback today, when you think that this will be live essentially?
I'm hoping very soon. Very soon. Again, I wanted to make sure I got feedback today, so I could incorporate what's going to work for providers. But I do have quite a lot built, so this will be ready to go very soon. I realize that's not a concrete date, but very close. And I do know we have some providers that are done with their budget calculators, and we would like to get those processed as soon as possible.
And I think, kick me under the virtual table, Tina, if I'm not saying this correctly, but I think for the few agencies that are done with their calculators, we, instead of the future practice of pulling everyone down on the same date and running everything, what we would do in this situation is attend to the agencies that are done. It's not, we don't have to wait for everybody because there'll be a little bit of a rolling calculator finish line here. So for those who are done, they'll be the first to kind of go and get the see their roster files.
Right. For this first month. Yes,
Right.
because of the rolling finish line, I think is what you described. Yes.
Which, to be clear, we have asked for October 31st. And we do need to hear from people if you're not going to hit that on Monday, if you haven't reached out to me already, we do need to hear from you, but we hope to have the calculators from agencies as soon as possible. And I'm going to just jump back over to Kara and then we'll go back to the chat.
Thanks, Jessica. Bear with me if you will, because we're, not a DA or an SSA. I apologize if this is a simple question, but what's the difference in purposes between the budget calculator and the roster? So that it appears, and I don't want to speak for anyone, so the roster is not going to be reflective of how people spend their money during the year, correct? It's just to show what monies they have in each category, the bundled payments, all of that for the entire year, in this case 9 months, and each month. But just so I can be sure I'm grasping all of this.
So it's a compilation of the budget calculators, because when you
Okay.
look at a budget calculator, it's just for that individual. And this allows you
Right.
to see all of the individuals for your agency in one report. somewhat like
Okay.
how you used to have the waiver spreadsheets where everybody was listed.
Yes.
So that is a component of the purpose of this report.
And Kara, the other piece we had to incorporate was because we now have case management organizations, two different organizations working with each agency.
Yes.
We had to have a way to be able to share all the individual information, but then also tell, T2, here's everybody for your agency, so you can get your full agency snapshot, but then also be able to say benchmark and, Columbus, here's your information. And so agencies need the roster file for like their PMPM calculation, because we had
Yeah.
some feedback that agencies didn't necessarily initially want that on the individual budget calculators to each, the utilization rate for each agency, and that. So that was also another solution to be able to put that on the roster file.
Okay, and our change is going to, it sounds like when someone is going to be moving funding from one category to another, that's the CMO that does it, right?
The CMO, yes, once your budget calculators are final, and you've let us know that they're final, Tina will run this roster file, and then CMOs will take over. So if there's a change, the case manager is going to be the person to update the budget calculator. The roster gets updated by Tina and her analytics that will pull it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful. And meanwhile, if we have our budget calculator done, which in this case we do, but we've had a number of requests to shift funding so people can pay their employees. We just continue to do that until someone, whether it's you, will you give us a heads up that, hey, the CMOs are all set to go in terms of they have their budget calculators and everything in order to take that over?
So I think so yes, we did hear from you that you're all done. Thank you. That's awesome. I think we need to talk a little bit about timing.
Right.
Because right now we're under the impression that your calculators won't change. So Tina can run the file. And so we would, I think, need to talk about if you have something that needs to change before we run that. Tina, I won't put my foot in my mouth. So if you want to talk about any opportunities for changes, if we've heard from an agency that it's final, but you haven't run their roster file.
I haven't run any of them yet, but I was planning as soon as I'm ready, the ones that I've heard from, I will pull down the files and run the process. I guess I wanted to understand, are these changes that are for the month of October, or are they changes that?
Yes, so we've already submitted our budget calculator. We did it, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. But because people and we support people who self and family manage, so all of their services go through ARS to be paid. So what's happening is there are some, because people do not have access to their entire annual budget, some people spend more respite or community, etc., during certain times of the year. So they don't usually get a quarter of a budget. They get a budget for the whole year. And some people are already running out of funds in certain categories. And one person in particular is running out of funds altogether and going to before the end of December. So either if they don't have access to their other 2 quarters of funding, and we do need to be able to shift funds for them. I realize this is a crucial time, so we're just really, we're trying to reach out to case management organizations also, like, are you ready to make changes? Because we have to do this or people are not going to get paid next week. So, but if we do make changes and you want us to make, I don't know how, if we make the changes with the case management organizations, we would tell them what changes that we made and maybe they could change the budget calculator afterward. I'm not sure. I realize this is a little unique in that our folks might tend to shift funds more than people who are, shared managing or those types of things. So anyway, I'm bringing it up. I know it's kind of unique to us, or it may be, but it's very time sensitive, and that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, here's my thought. So the CMOs haven't taken over anyone's budget calculator yet because Tina hasn't run the
Right.
roster files and we haven't told anyone to take over yet. So Kara, if you have changes that have happened over the last few weeks, then yes, we definitely want you to catch everybody up. Tina, you're nodding your head. So
Yeah.
for October, we definitely want you to capture those, if people are going for more community support or more respite. I think we want to capture that. So if you could make the updates for people who've shifted, and then at that point, that will catch us up for October. And then we should have, next week where Tina will be able to run. I'm just throwing that date out that next week Tina will be able to run this program, the roster file, and at that point, new changes, we'll hand things over to the CMOs when they're ready. We'll have to communicate that out. But yes, for October, Kara, if you could just go ahead, make those changes, and then send us another email so we'll know when it's ready. Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you so much. And Liba is probably going to follow up with that so she knows what she needs to do. I think she just raised her hand.
I just wanted to just be absolutely sure that the message to our employers is that starting November, the CMOs will be responsible for making any budget changes, correct?
If you can update the budget calculators and for October, and you let us know that the budget calculators are updated and Tina's able to run the roster, then we'll be able to communicate with the CMOs that the calculators are ready for them to take over. So assuming there's nothing that keeps you from updating the calculators over the next week, that is the plan. But we have to get your final sign off that it has been updated so that Tina can run that file so that then we know we can hand it over to CMOs.
Right. I mean, I'm prepared to make all the changes for October by Monday. So then anything that would need to change starting November would be up to the CMOs. Because I'm just trying to figure out a hard date where, my message to the EORs is that from this point forward, you need to go through CMOs.
Yes, and during this transition time, it's difficult because everyone is in a little bit of a different place. And so I think your hard date may not be the same as another agency's hard date. So we need to say that once we hear from you that it's updated, and then once Tina runs the roster, we can then say to the CMOs that it is on them to make the changes. It sounds like for your agency, they will be taking over in November, but that's a couple of steps have to happen. So I just want to be really clear about that we can't say November 3rd, they're going to be updating calculators because Tina has to run the roster right off of the calculators. So we wouldn't on November 3rd want CMOs kind of rushing in to make a change because we have to have a little holding period right now while we transition. So Tina knows she's running it based off of the latest calculator. Tina, am I saying the correct thing that we need a moment? So we say, great, T2 is done. We let Tina know, she runs the file, then CMOs know that they can make changes. Because if they go in to make a change after you've done that, it's going to throw off the process.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's our understanding that the CMOs will be making changes for all agencies. Is that correct? Because you had just mentioned that for our agency, that's the case, but it's our understanding it's for all the agencies.
It is for all agencies. I just was responding to you
No,
all.
that's great. No, I just wanted to be sure I got that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I just want to go to the chat before we go to Sherry. So because we'll have the roster and then a separate encounter report, we essentially be able to put the two reports together to see what's budgeted versus being delivered. That's my hope. Like I said, we're hiring analysts now. So those are the people that we'll want to work with to see what those capabilities are. But that is the hope, is that eventually we'll be able to get something that kind of pulls everything together. Carissa, on the waiver, the ability to add rows with specific start and end dates allowed us to calculate total units needed for an activity over the course of the year in one centralized place. So if an individual received a few hours of employment during the first 2 months and then transitioned to community support, we could still assess the total units required for the year, regardless of when services started or ended. The start and end dates were essential for understanding expected service delivery. So I think that sounds like more of a statement than a question, but needing to be able to track total units needed for an activity. I think that's our goal, is that we agree we want to be able to capture that. And Chuck, will the file highlight changes made during the previous month in order to streamline the approval process? That we will have 2 days to complete. Hang on, sorry. When another comment comes in, it moves the chat. Will the file highlight changes made during the previous month in order to streamline the approval process that we will have 2 days to complete, either being able to filter by changes or conditional formatting to draw our attention to specific lines? So I think we talked about that. There's going to be a change tab so that you'll have a really quick snapshot to review. If the PMPM rate is calculated based on the month to be paid, used to be the full year allocation amount paid to date divided by months remaining, and changes can go back 45 days. However, changes to prior months considered. So we're not looking to go back. So people need to be communicating what the changes are for a month. Part of that is why we have, crisis supports available to pay fee for service. If you have to respond to crisis, that's not something you need to build into somebody's budget. But if someone is changing, they got a job and so they need less community support, that's something that really has to be communicated, updated in the budget calculator. That's not something we're going to go back and make adjustments on. And then last comment for the moment, our service agency is allowed to make any changes for October as long as it is within their tiered budget without asking for approval. So if you need to make changes in October, so in that example where somebody got a job and needs more employment support, less community support, if you need to make that change now for your budget calculator and it doesn't increase the cost, you don't have to ask the department for funding, then that's something that you are able to do. Yes. But if you are looking to keep the community support and add employment support, and there's going to be an additional cost to fund those services, you would have to you'd have to work with the CMO to make the funding request. So Sherry.
Yeah, I just kind of want to follow up regarding the timeline. So it was my understanding previously that we would be getting notified once we were ready to kind of take that over, like across the board. We're not now saying that when one agency is done, we'll be notified, and is it going to be kind of a rollout? It's going to be much easier for us to manage if we have a consistency across the board. I think if one family is being told, oh, because they're working with one agency, that the CMOs are now responsible for this, but then the next one doesn't have that, I think it's going to just be very confusing for everybody across the board.
Sherry, I completely agree. We set we set the deadline for when we needed budget calculators to be done. And I know every agency is in a little bit of a different place. And, you know, none of us can control other people. And so I think I'm also trying to be really realistic about what it is that we might see and have to plan for. So if we have, you know, agencies, since we have tomorrow as the deadline, I'm not, you know, Monday morning is kind of when we'll kind of expect to see what the, where every agency is at in terms of where's your budget calculator, letting Tina know who's ready to kind of work on this roster process. So I'm just trying to be realistic and transparent about the fact that we've set a deadline for everybody outside of hearing from a few different agencies about some difficulties that they're having. We can't hold everybody up if we have some agencies that are ready and we have some that are not. We will need to just kind of move the process forward and hope that everyone is ready at the same time. But I think we just have to also be realistic that there are some things that are just taking longer for different reasons, you know, agency staffing issues or more people served or illnesses that are happening, that kind of thing.
Okay, so on Monday or some way early next week, we should expect to hear some kind of correspondence from the state saying who and which agencies were responsible for
I will be trying to get
taking
a
over
sense.
the budget.
Yeah, on Monday, I'm going to try to get a sense from agencies about if we haven't gotten an email saying our calculators are done. I'll be checking in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Brent?
I guess I just want to go back to the conversation about the timeline and changes, and I know I've brought this up before. I feel like I just need to keep saying it. Is kind of, and I guess I just need to understand for myself from the CMO's perspective of, frankly, how far back we are able to go to say, oh, this thing changed. And I just think the reality of, and I promise we're going to do the best we can to communicate changes with the CMO as soon as we realize those things are happening. My fear and what I don't want for us as a system to be in a place where the time frame of this, like that we're not, like how far back can we go to say, oh, this thing happened? Because all kinds of things happen. I have a case manager who's out with COVID. We have a service coordinator. Then the CMO who's in charge, maybe they're out on maternity leave and somebody's covering. Like there are real world things that impact us every day on like being able to make these adjustments and do these things. And then you've got a timeline. I guess I just need to concretely really understand for myself and the case manager of how far back can we go to make changes, because these things do happen. We will. I know it probably sounds preposterous to some people of like, you didn't know that it took 6 months, or sorry, 6, 7, 8 weeks before we realized, oh, right, that person's now working twice as many hours because they got a new job and we haven't made that change. And oh, that person was out. And now we're like, those things are going to happen. And so, and for us, like we're, as the provider, we're going to provide those services that the individual needs. And historically, right, even with the equity process, right, there was a time lag. It was like we had local, then we had equity, there was the time to need to write it. And so we would all the time just be working together in good faith. We would go to local and say, okay, the date on this was 6 weeks ago. By the time we got the approval at, local, then equity, and then approval, there was quite a bit of time, and we would all work together to make sure that those retroactive effective dates were happening. And so for me, I'm still, every time I hear this in these meetings, my hackles get up and I go, okay, how are we doing this in the reality of this thing happened? Yes, it's been a little, we didn't get it communicated as soon as possible. And maybe this is all in the writing, somewhere this is drawn up and I need to just read it again, but help me just understand how far back we can go and how we're dealing with retroactive adjustments as needed.
Yeah, I mean, we can't go back because the budget calculators, once they're kind of put into that date, which will be more consistent in the future once we get out of our transition period, then we update the roster file. Like that's you can't go back to update something that happened previously, because that's an old calculator. Now there's a new kind of calculator that's being updated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you have an extraordinary situation where I can't think of what would be something that kind of floated under the radar, but we probably would need to talk about strategies in terms of the current calculator and capturing something accurately, if there's something we can do on that end. And Stephen and Tina, if you have other ideas, please feel free to jump in, or if it's something we want to continue to brainstorm on.
I can just reiterate what we've said previously. The first is what you already shared, Jessica, which is we're not going to go back and make retroactive adjustments to the calculation of the monthly PMPM, right? Once the October's locked in, we're not going to ask folks to reprocess, to reverse claims and resubmit claims.
Right, of course.
What we also said is that it's not our intent to include adjustments in real time. Like, so if we find out that something unfolded differently in October than expected, there's not going to be like a balancing factor in the November calculations. Instead, what we've said is that the reconciliation process will be used to make that sort of cleanup. So if someone moved into employment in October and for whatever reason that wasn't picked up, you'll still get credit for the services delivered in October as part of reconciliation, right? That will be covered as part of their service plan. But otherwise, what we've said is that there's not the ability for us to be making those retroactive adjustments either to the previously paid PMPMs or to include a prior month adjustment factor to the current month PMPMs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all that makes sense. I totally get, like, we're not going to go back and adjust PMPMs. That would just make no sense. I think and maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but my thinking was, or what I thought I was envisioning this new system happening is the PMPM is what it was set, that's fine. But let's say that, next month I have a change and I realize, oh, this adjustment goes back into October or even the end of September. Those PMPMs are set, the calculator, whatever, that's all been done, but that it's changing the overall annual authorized amount, right? So that when we get to the end of the year, even if I have retroactive changes that have happened outside of the time frame, right? We get to the end of the year, all the changes are in, and we would know how many authorizations we should have had, right? So it's like, we're not changing the PMPM, but we know because we've changed the calculators month to month as needed, that I could still go back and say, oh, in the month, 2 months ago, it should have been this many units in this month, this many units in that month. So we know at the end of the year how many we were authorized for. We might not have been paid for them all because the PMPM wasn't adjusted, but through reconciliation, those amounts have been authorized. And that's my fear of not being able to get changes authorized that do need to happen in arrears. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't think we're saying different things, but it's probably going to be more helpful for us to like mock something up, not here in the next 7 minutes for this meeting, but maybe for a subsequent meeting to talk about how we envision that specifically working.
Okay. So it sounds like then that is possible, you're saying? Like we can work with the CMO to say, oh, that thing 6 or 8 weeks ago is okay. You won't get an adjustment in your payments, but it'll go through reconciliation. We can have changes happen retroactively, I guess is my question. Separate from PMPM adjustments and payments business.
I think, Jessica, that's our intent. I mean, certainly we want providers to get paid for services consistent with what people's plans say that they need. And I think you've agreed that we're not trying to be making adjustments in retroactively. So, but yes, if it turns out that someone, to make a more cut and dried example, because it's such a big rate, if for some reason, I don't know why that reason would be, but that shared living, someone moved into shared living and it wasn't captured in time, and you should have been paid for shared living in October, yes, you'll get credit during the reconciliation process for having delivered shared living in October, even though it wasn't never part of the PMPM. So that would be credited for the valuation of the services that you delivered.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
That's our, Jessica, I believe that's our intent.
Yes, yes, we want to be able to capture it without readjusting claims, without trying to go back and like reimagine calculators. So yes, we do want to capture it, but it just won't be through kind of past practices of kind of just updating a spreadsheet or updating the roster, or updating the calculator. It'll be capturing the information, but being able to move forward with it, not retroactive, if that makes sense. Yeah. Just have a couple of minutes left, and Tina brought up another calculator. So I just want to see if Tina, if you had an example or that you were going to walk through.
Yeah, I wanted to, well, along the lines of what we were just discussing. So there is a section of the budget calculator that was added sort of at the very end of the development when we discussed that the final date would be earlier than the very end of the month. And so that there could be, if it ends up being, the 25th of the month is the regular pull down date, there could be changes that occurred at those last few days. But it seems like this also might be fitting the conversation we were just having about basically something that is approved, but it's retroactive. The prior month is already closed. We're not going to go back and change any payments, but we did put these columns here in the budget calculator to track. This is what I came up with for a label: post month end approved units to track for reconciliation. So along the lines of, we're not doing anything currently to try to stick it back into the month of October, but we would track it, and it's in the budget calculator so that when it came time to reconciliation, it's been tracked. I just wanted to point out that those columns were here. I don't know that we ever went into much detail about them.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, Tina, because I don't think we did. And that's great. That can be the record of, oh, wait, now it's the end of November, and we just found out that in October, someone got the job and they're getting more employment support than community support. So you could capture it there for October, and then the rest of the time going forward should reflect reality of what's expected.
Right.
So if I just clarify on that, so that what you're saying is, let's say in the example what I was saying before, like you're missing something, the employment was shorted, I'm just going to say 100 units. The PMPM had a bunch of it, but you were short those 100 units, whatever it is, in October. I would go in here to record, oh, or not me, but the CMO would approve that 100 missing units are recorded here. You wouldn't be going back to the actual October column in here and changing the numbers to say the amount for the whole month should be X instead of Y. Because that's what I was envisioning, was like, even like these calculators were being used, yes, snapshot in time, you're creating the PMPM based on what was authorized, but if we're getting a copy every month, what I had envisioned was that these numbers could be, or maybe were being adjusted when a change in the previous month happened. Again, it's completely separate from the PMPM payment, but that in total, we would know at the end of the year how many are authorized, because we are authorizing changes that are in arrears, even though the PMPM was set when it was a different number, if that makes sense. So again, just trying to wrap my head around how I'm working with the CMO and the retroactive business. But I think I see what you're saying. It feels more complicated mathematically wise for someone to say, oh, you were short 100 units in the month of October. Let's plug it in here. But I think I see what you're saying.
I think it's right. So I just want to be really careful with language. So if someone was approved for more employment support, and if it was 100 units more for a month and it didn't get recorded let's just pretend this was happening in September. September's already closed out. We already ran the roster. The PMPM was calculated, and you have that conversation. You go, oh, shoot, we forgot to communicate this to the CMO, which I would hope not, because the CMO should be approving changes. But let's just say whatever happens, someone's out on medical leave unexpectedly, right? Stuff happens. So, and it's going to be ongoing. So then September is closed out. It's the end of October when this gets caught. So for September, pretend there's a September column, you would be putting in the difference that wasn't recorded in September in this post-month end approved column. And then you'd be updating the calculator for the rest of the month that are continuing, that are coming in the future, that you would expect the person to keep getting the service. So is that, Tina, did I use correct language?
Yes, I think so. So you would only record something in this section here if it's the situation we discussed. The month's already ended, the PMPM has been calculated and paid. Oh, and this thing was missed. It is approved. We need to record it. It gets recorded here. But whatever that ongoing change is, that's not here. That goes in the future months here.
Okay. So those missing units that do get authorized but late could go here, and you'd be scooping up additionally those units when creating the annualized roster file to say, here's how many units were authorized, because you're getting the original amount plus the amount that it's sort of post approved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it's still a way to track it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll have a record. And I think that answers Ellen's question in the chat about how it will be captured. So it'll be in those fields. And then we are a minute over. And so I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. But the last question, 2 questions in the chat. Can we get a draft of the roster template file to help review, to help agencies begin to think about how to use this file to build their own budget, to actual comparison report? And then another request for a simple CSV export of the fields in the budget calculators to aggregate the data. So I don't know as though we're ready to share a template yet, because we have to incorporate some feedback. Is that right, Tina?
Yeah, because I do need to incorporate the feedback from today. And I'm hoping that as soon as we can get this finalized, then I would just start creating the roster files for providers that are ready. So I'm still need to work on the draft to get it ready to go. And then I'm hoping to just start working on actually creating real rosters rather than trying to send out a draft. And it would just be very difficult because right now I do have like live identifying patient information in the background. So I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather get to creating the rosters, the real ones, and get those out to you as soon as possible.
And Ed, it was his question. It sounds like you have a follow-up. You are on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to understand what is in the columns because we really couldn't tell when you whistled through it. And trying to marry it up essentially to the budget calculator detail rows. I mean, there's over 110 rows with the demographic identifiers in the budget calculator file, but there's only about 12 columns in the roster tab that I could count. So, we're going to have to be accountable to this here fairly quickly to keep moving forward. And I would think a blank version of this must be somewhere without data in it that could be just delivered so that we can start to get our heads around it and potentially provide additional feedback. I don't.
Well, that was part of my question, was trying to understand today if providers are looking for that very fine detail of the services that are 1-to-1, 1-to-2, or if it would be more useful to have the services rolled up. So,
well, I may be wrong, but my understanding has been that we're not going to be able to actually get the detail of the budget calculator file in a digestible format. And so this roster version of the information is something that my understanding has been, and I may be off track, that we would be able to access and download a copy of the file so that we can use it to basically do something with it without having somebody hand key a bunch of information for, in our case, 700 to 800 clients into a tool, essentially, to be able to do this budget to actual comparison on a more sophisticated level than just having, you know, two of them up on a screen. So that's all I'm asking for. I don't know. Maybe it's not possible, but you know, it just seems like in the neighborhood of a possibility. And I think most of us would find it helpful. Whenever you can do that.
So you're looking for the very detailed version, like every field from as much as possible from the budget calculator.
I think whatever we're gonna have to reconcile to, right? This roster file, my understanding, was supposed to be something we could download that we could reconcile the actual units of service that we submit to the MMIS. We need to compare it to something over the course of time. And, you know, I think a number of agencies have a fair amount of volume of clients and services to sort of do this comparison with. We're not going to be able to do this, you know, onesie twosie approach. So, you know, if the roster file template as it's laid out is not what we're going to be held accountable to, then we need something that we can use that we are going to be held accountable to.
I think the goal is that this is the tool that will show you the allocation that is expected to sync back to for reconciliation. We talked about having the units and the dollar amounts and having things broken out. So having multiple tabs so that there's more of a snapshot. If you want to see like what we're looking at is a little more condensed, having more detail, and then, you know, having a tab that doesn't exist yet around the changes, right? Because there haven't been any changes. So that's, so I think the goal is to have a little bit of everything so that you've got rolled up. Here's your quick view, and then here's your detailed view. Tina, am I summarizing that appropriately?
I think that's the direction we're going now after today's conversation. So yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. I do think the detail is what we'll need, because we could pivot it ourselves as well, or whatever. I mean, thank you.
And we are over time, so I know we've probably lost some people who had to get to their meetings. I'm sorry, Tina, if you had a 3 o'clock meeting that you are now very late for. This was great questions, good feedback, so that we can make some updates. And once we start getting these out to some agencies who are ready, I think that'll be just a really great milestone. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And we will schedule more times to connect. So keep an eye out. I'll probably send those out, but we'll have to connect about our own internal availability. So we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you both. Bye.
Thank you.